Alright, so, before I get into today's video, I wanted to do something a little different with this one. I've already recorded the story and edited and made it into a video and all the good stuff, but this being based on a true story, something that happened to me some 20 years ago or so, I thought it could be interesting to just, tell you my version of it in the less writer dressed up way. Just through my own words. And if you guys want to check out the actual story that I wrote about what happened, it'll be later in the video, and I'll try to remember to do all the timestamp stuff. I'm still getting used to the whole YouTube thing, so just bear with me. But yeah, I thought this would be a very rare opportunity to, let you guys get to know me a bit and hear my words, as opposed to the more colorful ones I might put on the page. So here it is. Like I said, this was about 20 years ago, and I was driving home from my girlfriend's house, and after that, it just sort of goes blank. I found myself kind of dazed, walking around in a field. I had no idea where I was, and I think I kept kind of blacking out because I was alone in the field, and then I was not. There were two cops in the field. One of them was over by my pretty messed up car, and the other one was kind of just shining a flashlight on me trying to get some answers. So, we had a bit of back and forth, and they asked me if anybody else was in the car with me, and I had absolutely no doubt in my mind that I did have someone in the car with me. It was still very, very foggy. But I remember having, I don't know if I picked up a hitchhiker or if, I don't know. So, I ran over to the car and, luckily the cops were just incredibly cool and just amazing people. And, they didn't reach for their guns or anything when I went storming towards one of them all frantic like. So I looked in the window just, expecting the passenger to still be casually sitting in the car because, I'm wandering around in the field. There's no reason for him not to just sit there and relax. But no, not only was he not in there, but the roof was crushed down on the passenger seat. So if he was toast. So the ambulance showed up, and I got the whole complimentary blanket wrapped over me. And next thing I know, I blacked out. I came to again at the hospital sometime later. I was rolling through the hallway, and my mom came running up, and she was freaking out. She was freaking out more than anybody. Doctors were trying to cool her down and everything like that, and I blacked out again. So again, I come to on the hospital bed, and the doctor's in there getting ready to stitch up my eyebrow and the damage I took to my hand. So he puts the needle in, tries to numb it, which it didn't work. I felt every bloody stitch. And I tried to ask him. I was like, hey, I can still feel this. And he just kind of nodded his head, really immersed in what he was doing. But, there's still a part of me that wonders if I was saying these thoughts out loud or if they were just in my head, because my mom wasn't saying a word the whole time. So yeah, he gets done with that. He gets done stitching up my mangled knuckles, and my left pinky was in a splint because it actually got broken in 7 places. And my whole arm was just black and blue and purple. So yeah, he leaves. Another couple of doctors and nurses come in to try and repair my ear. I'd shaved off a portion of my ear. It's nothing dramatic. It was literally just a strip of skin that for some reason they wanted to try and, stitch back on. So yeah, the hospital was a blast. But when it was clear to come home, my mom, took me back to her place so she could keep an eye on me and all that good stuff. And the following day, we went to go check out the car. Because, everything was blurry to me. I hadn't really focused on it. So we go to this shop where the car was towed to. And, the guy who runs the place or worked at the place came walking out, greeted us and all that good stuff. And my mom told him that we were here to see the car that was picked up on this chunk of the road that was wrapped around a tree. And the guy, just starts giving my mom his condolences. Sorry for your loss and all that good stuff. And she's like, no, there's nothing to be sorry for. This is him right here. And the guy just looked, shocked. just bewildered that, you know, just this bruised and beaten guy had survived the wreck. So he takes us back to the old boneyard where the car is towed to. And when we got there, I mean, me and my mom were just speechless. And the dude was still just like staring me down like I was some kind of apparition or something. So yeah, we look at the car, and not only is the entire roof in all 4 seats where there's not the slightest bit of room for anyone to get their way out of it, but there's still blood, like in the center console, or on the steering wheel, on the floorboards. It was a mess. You know, my mom, she started crying again, and I'm just, you know, what the hell am I looking at here? So another couple of days goes by. We get the police report that says that it looks like the car went off the road due to severe weather conditions. Now, I remember it's, you know, some rain, but I don't remember much about that night anyway, so, you know, my world can't really count for much on that, I suppose. But according to what the police thought, I mean, they assumed that I'd got the gash across my eyebrow from going through the sunroof, and that, like, my right knuckles were just all chewed up from where the windshield smashed in on it, and my pinky and left arm were likely from the bracket and the door crushing down on me. But, you know, none of that adds up to me, because with the roof having been just sandwiched into the seat, if I was in the car when the roof wrapped around the tree, how the hell did I get out? You know, I had the injuries pretty much yelling, like, yeah, this kid was in there when the car was crushed, but somehow I found myself wandering around in a field. So my mom did a lot of talking, trying to puzzle it together and all that good stuff. And finally dawned on me, you know, how did she know to come to the hospital that night? And she described essentially the exact same man who I was convinced was in the passenger seat, who was like, you know, just an average looking guy, bushy dark hair, bushy beard, like a green military jacket and a thick woolly sweater. And yeah, that just blew both our minds. Yeah, this less fancy version of the story is a lot less colorful than the one I wrote up, but you know, the facts remain the same. You know, seemingly this, I know I'd picked up this hitchhiker. I don't know if I'd taken him to where he needed to be. Maybe he just wandered off on the side of the road before, I don't know, my car flipped into a bloody tree. But definitely one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. So, you know, take from it what you will. I'm sure, you know, time has altered some of the details in my head. But, you know, the fact that still to this day, I cannot remember a thing after I left my girlfriend's house to when I came to just staggering around in this field. And, you know, what are the odds in this open field that I go off the road into the one tree that's standing right in the middle of the bloody thing? So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, you know, I made up the video already, so if you'd like to check that out, you know, by all means, I hope you do, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. And, yeah, on a personal note, this being the first time I've spoke as me, and not just a narrator, I just wanted to give you guys a massive, massive thank you for checking out the work we do. Tim and I both just have the utmost love and respect for writing, and taking it to this new medium has been just a phenomenal experience, and that's 100% due to you guys. And I hope you enjoy what we put out. I know, like, we're still learning a lot and trying to find our voice, and I know we're gonna make mistakes and flubs, and I just appreciate you guys being patient with us on this and sticking around with us during the growing pains. But yeah, that is my weird story, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. And here in a few moments, the actual pretty version of the story will be coming up. But for those of you who checked out this part of it, you know, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Was there anyone else in the car with you? The voice asked from somewhere off to the left of me. What? I asked, slowly coming back to my senses. Did you have anyone else riding with you? The voice asked as my eyes began to focus on my surroundings. Yes, I replied, suddenly growing aware of what had happened. A passenger. I was still dazed from the apparent accident I'd been in. I was just standing in the middle of a field when the cops rolled up, but I couldn't recall what had occurred. Are you sure you had a passenger? The voice asked again. Finally, more of my senses returned, and I turned to see 2 police officers in the field with me. One of the 2 was over by my crumpled car, while the other was shining a flashlight in my direction. The officer who was investigating my vehicle shook his head at the one closest to me. There's no sign of any passenger. Are you absolutely sure you were not alone? Yes, I insisted, suddenly feeling my heart racing. Though I was quite bewildered by the events that found me aimlessly wandering around in the grass, I had one solitary and persistent certainty. There had most definitely been someone in the car with me. I became erratic in my actions as I ran to the car that sat on all 4 wheels next to the massive thick tree that stood alone in the open field. I was sure that the cops had somehow completely overlooked the man I knew to be sitting in the passenger seat. Calm down, kid, the officer who stood by the vehicle said. I halfway expected him to reach for his gun when I charged towards him, but he appeared genuinely concerned about my mental state at the time. As I made my way to look through the windshield, I expected to see the hitchhiker still sitting there. This would prove a much more difficult task than I had realized, as the roof appeared to be resting in the passenger seat. He was in there, I exclaimed as I darted my eyes between the cops, who both wore similarly confused expressions. Tell us what happened, the taller of the 2 asked me. That was a question I found myself unable to answer. I remembered leaving my girlfriend's house, and I fully recalled driving down the road I had traversed many times before, but that was it. Somehow I could describe the man who I'd rode shotgun, but I had no recollection of picking him up. He was average height and build, I told the officer who had asked me all the questions up until now. He had thick, shaggy hair and a bushy beard. The cop was writing in his little notepad while I spoke as the ambulance came rolling up to the side of the field. He wore, like, a faded green army coat with a woolen sweater underneath, I continued as a paramedic draped a blanket over my shoulders. He looked like he may have been homeless or something. He was a bit dirty, you know. My head started to spin as I spoke. He didn't smell bad, though, I don't think, but he seemed like a really good... Somewhere in the middle of my description of the man I had apparently picked up on the side of the road, I passed out. Sometime later, I awoke to the sounds of a busy hospital. I was being rolled through the corridor while doctors and nurses were doing the work on me. I was still out of it, but I instantly recognized the voice of my mother, who came running up beside the gurney I was laying on. She practically screamed out as she arrived beside me, asking the doctors if I was going to be okay. She screamed louder to the hospital staff, who seemed unresponsive to her inquiry. Your son is going to be all right, ma'am, the doctor calmly replied. It looks far worse than it is, he continued before I fell into darkness again. The next time I opened my eyes, I was laying on a bed while a doctor or a nurse came rolling up with a tray of instruments up beside me. I winced as they jabbed a needle into the apparent gash across my left eyebrow. Within moments after the injection, they began to sew into the cut with a needle and thread. Ow, I said. The doctor replied as he continued to weave the needle through my brow. I can still feel that, I said, bracing myself with every poke. The man in the white coat muttered as he kept sewing away. He seemed quite focused on his task, and my words didn't appear to register with him. I just continued to grip down on the bed sheets every time he passed the needle through my open wound. After he finished up, I realized I also felt a sharp pain shoot through my right arm and hand. I looked down to see my knuckles shredded, and my arm was a deep purple from top to bottom. In addition, my left pinky stood straight out, braced by a metal splint. My mother still sat at my bedside, and her eyes were puffy and red while she smiled across from me. She wasn't saying much, but I assumed she just wanted to allow the doctor to do his job uninterrupted. I couldn't help but wonder if the words I spoke while my eyebrow was being stitched together had only been in my head. After the gash above my eye was closed up, the doc went to work on my hand. There wasn't nearly as much pain while he attempted to close the numerous wounds across my knuckles, but my whole arm felt numb still. There was the occasional shooting pain, but only when I tried to move it. We'll have to perform some reconstructive surgery on your ear, but we'll let you rest up before we start, the doctor said as he got to his feet. Someone will be with you shortly. My mom began to tear up again when he spoke, and I reached up to feel my ears. I was suddenly concerned that I was missing half a lobe or something, but I felt my heart settle back into place when I ran my fingers across the slightly chewed up cartilage at the very top of my ear. Doesn't feel like it needs reconstruction, I shrugged at my weeping mother. She told me they just wanted to try and reattach the bit that was shaved off. We talked back and forth for a little while as a few more nurses and a different doctor entered the room. They investigated my ear for a bit before they got to work in their attempt to stitch back the thin strip of meat that had been severed. It would ultimately prove unsuccessful, but a slightly thinner ear was the least of my concerns at the time. After a while, all of my injuries had been treated, and I was to be cleared to leave the hospital. It would take them a bit to have all the paperwork ready, so I took a moment to stroll to the bathroom to the side of my hospital bed. Jesus Christ, I said when I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Blood covered my entire face, and my shoulder-length hair was still matted with sticky crimson globs. My right arm was easily twice the size of my left, and it was several shades of purple and blue. I couldn't see my left pinky finger through the bandages and splint, but it felt like it weighed a few more pounds than it used to. My ear didn't look that bad at all. I honestly don't know why they even bothered to attempt to reattach such a thin sliver. I suppose it would just be to inflate the already enormous bill even more. I walked back out of the bathroom to see the two officers and the paramedics who had aided me in the field. I was already getting prepared to answer a barrage of new questions, but they only wanted to check in and see how I was doing. All four of them appeared genuinely surprised that my injuries were so minimal. I guess I just got lucky, I shrugged. I didn't know that kind of luck was possible, the shorter of the paramedics exclaimed. How did you even get out of the car? The other asked. I just shrugged, genuinely unsure about anything that had happened since I left my girlfriend's house. You got someone looking out for you, kid, the officer who had interrogated me in the field said. Eventually, I was released from the hospital with a few prescriptions to pick up and warnings for what to look out for with my concussion. My mom drove me to the pharmacy and then back to her house so she could keep an eye on me. I went to take a shower, but my legs were still shaky from the night's event, so I just lay in a hot bath for a while. I wanted to stay in longer, but it didn't take long for the water to become bloody and filthy, so I just dried off and put on some warm clothes. After a few days passed, my mom took me to the shop in which they had hauled my poor demolished Pontiac. It was only a short drive from the house, but she wanted to see how bad it was as much as I did. As we walked up to the small building surrounded by vehicles in many states of disarray, a tall, slender man approached us, wiping grease and oil off of his hands with a blue towel. "What can I do for you fine folks?" the man asked in a scratchy but pleasant voice. My mom went on to explain that we were here to see her son's car that had wrapped itself around a tree a few days back. She described the car and the location it had been picked up at. "I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am," the man replied, bowing his head slightly. My mom said there was no need for all that with a laugh, telling the guy that this was her son right here, gesturing towards me. The man just stuttered as his eyes grew wide and shocked. After some back and forth during which the man would not take his eyes off me, he waved us forward to follow him. We walked around to the back of the building and into a veritable boneyard of beaten and broken vehicles before we reached what was left of my poor Pontiac. My mom gasped and I just stared slack-jawed at what lay before me. The entire roof of the car had been crushed down on top of both the front and rear seats. There was absolutely no room left for one person, let alone two, to have sat. On top of that, a wide pool of blood filled the center console and the driver's seat, along with more that lined the buckled steering wheel. "We were sure nobody could have survived that," our guide said, scratching his head with his grease-stained hand. Some days afterwards, we received a police report of the accident that occurred that night. According to their investigations, I had lost control of my car due to severe weather conditions, though I remembered no more than a light rain. It would appear that my vehicle flipped at the tight curve and wrapped the roof around the thick tree, crushing it down upon me. The windshield had shredded my knuckles that still held onto the steering wheel, while the window bracket crushed my left pinky finger. The wounds to my eyebrow, ear, right arm seemed to have been caused by the sunroof as it wrapped around me. It was assumed that's how I made my escape. The concept is still questionable to me, as the injuries to my hands would imply I was still sitting in the driver's seat while the roof crushed down onto the chair I was sitting on. My mom and I puzzled over the events for quite some time, until another question dawned on me. "How did you know to come to the hospital that night?" I asked her. This was a time before cell phones were so commonplace, and her address was not indicated on my driver's license, nor did I have any of her contact information on me. She went on to explain that a man had come knocking on her door that rainy night. He told her that her son had been in an accident, and he was heading to the hospital as they spoke. When I asked her what he looked like, she described an average-sized man with dark, messy hair and a thick beard. He wore a military-style jacket and a thick sweater underneath. By the time she grabbed her keys and threw on a coat and headed out the door, there was no sign of the stranger, who she thought nothing about until I made my inquiry. This is a true story that occurred some 20 years ago. Some details have surely been adjusted in my mind's eye over the years, but I still hold on to the memory of the passenger I met that night. I vaguely remember a conversation we had as I drove the familiar road, though I cannot recall a single word we spoke nor the accident itself. It could be argued that I imagined the whole thing, or even that I gave the guy a ride to where he needed to go before I hit the steep curve. It could even stand to reason that he could have been responsible for the wreck in the first place, but I highly doubt that scenario. I don't know if I'll ever have answers to what truly happened that night all those years ago, but should I ever again see the stranger in the faded green army coat, I think I owe him my gratitude.